The Shadow sat in his dark chamber aboard his stealth ship, studying the new contract on his holographic screen. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he read the details again, making sure he hadn't misunderstood. Target species: human. Location: Earth. Assignment: eliminate James Miller, Earth Diplomatic Corps. Reward: 50 million galactic credits. He had killed members of 200 different species across the galaxy. Politicians, warlords, crime lords, all had fallen to his perfect methods, but never a human. In fact, he had never even seen a human up close. Computer, he spoke into the darkness. Show me data on human biology. The screen filled with basic information. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. Internal skeleton made of calcium. Skin that couldn't change color. No natural armor. No claws. No venom. They weren't even particularly strong compared to other species. How did such weak creatures join the Galactic Council? He muttered to himself. The Shadow started his usual preparation routine, studying Earth's atmosphere, gravity, and local security measures. Everything seemed surprisingly simple. Humans didn't even have planetary shields like most advanced worlds. His computer chimed with an incoming message. Priority level: maximum. Warning to all guild members. Human contracts are extremely dangerous. Previous attempt survival rate: 0%. Recommend immediate rejection. The Shadow deleted the message with a flick of his scaled fingers. Guild warnings were common, usually sent by failed assassins trying to save face. Besides, the reward was the highest he'd seen in 50 years. He entered Earth's coordinates into his navigation system. As he did, another message arrived. From Anonymous. Subject: don't take the human contract. They see things they shouldn't. They notice what isn't there. They remember everything. The last 12 assassins who tried never came back. This isn't a threat. It's a warning from someone who cares if you live. The Shadow laughed quietly. 2 warnings in one day. Humans must have powerful friends, or perhaps they were just very good at spreading fear. Computer, accept contract, he commanded. Set course for Earth. As his ship entered hyperspace, the computer chimed one final time. This message was different. Text only. No sender information. No digital signature. Since you're coming anyway, here's some free advice. Don't use your perfect camouflage. Don't try your undetectable poisons. Don't trust your flawless plans. Humans are wrong. Everything about them is wrong. You won't understand until it's too late. But we tried to warn you. The Shadow archived the message with the others. In his long career, he had learned that scared targets often played mind games. These humans were clearly trying to protect their diplomat through psychological warfare. Too bad they didn't know about his perfect record, his flawless techniques, his absolute professionalism. How dangerous could one human be? As his ship rushed toward Earth, the Shadow began his preparations, unaware that he was about to learn exactly why the warnings had been sent, and why he should have listened. The Shadow sat in his stealth ship, hidden behind Earth's moon. His dark gray fingers danced across the holographic controls as he prepared for planetary entry. 300 successful assassinations had taught him patience. Humans were just another target species, primitive beings who had somehow stumbled their way into the Galactic Council. The first message arrived with a soft chime. Unknown vessel, this is a friendly warning. We detect your presence and purpose, the human target you seek. Please reconsider. This is not a threat. We wish to avoid unnecessary loss of life. The Shadow deleted it without a second thought. Prey species often try to discourage hunters. Yet something felt different about this warning. It lacked the usual threats or begging. Its tone was almost concerned. A second message popped up, this time from a different source. To the assassin behind the moon, 3 others tried before you. We recovered enough of their ships to send this warning. Humans are different. Walk away. Live. The Shadow's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of mild irritation. He had faced defensive warnings before, but never from multiple unconnected sources. Most species barely cooperated within their own planets, let alone work together to protect someone. As he began atmospheric entry procedures, his ship's computer chimed again, and again, and again. Messages flooded his communication system. They came from merchant vessels, diplomatic ships, even passing cargo haulers. Each carried the same basic warning: leave, run, the human is not worth it. Fascinating psychological warfare. The Shadow muttered to himself, his sharp teeth clicking together in amusement, but ultimately useless. Then came the message that made his scaled skin tingle. It was from another assassin, one he recognized. Old Nick, they called him, a legend who had never failed a contract in 40 years. Until last year, he had disappeared after accepting a human target. Brother in shadows, I broke my perfect record because I was wise enough to run. These humans, they're wrong. Everything about them is wrong. They don't move right. They don't think right. They see patterns that don't exist until they make them exist. Get out. The money isn't worth it. The Shadow paused his entry sequence. Old Nick was a legend. If he had run. No, this was just another clever human trick. They had obviously captured Old Nick, forced him to send this message. The Shadow had killed politicians, warlords, crime bosses, and religious leaders. One simple human diplomat couldn't be any different. He pushed his ship into Earth's atmosphere, wearing his confidence like armor. Let them send their warnings. Let them try their psychological games. He was the Shadow, death made real, feared across 200 systems. As his ship broke through the cloud cover, one final message came through. Unlike the others, this one was just coordinates and 6 words. Since you're coming anyway, let's talk. It was signed by his target, James Miller. The Shadow felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, a cold shiver running down his spine. For the first time, he wondered if he should have heeded the warnings. But it was too late now. He was committed, wasn't he? The Shadow perched invisible on a rooftop, watching James Miller through advanced optics. For 3 days straight, he had observed his target's every move, and nothing made sense. Miller lived in a simple ground-floor apartment. No security systems, no guards, no weapons. The human even left his windows open at night, as if daring the universe to try something. It went against everything the Shadow knew about important diplomatic targets. This has to be a trap, he whispered to himself, adjusting his camouflage field. On the street below, Miller walked out of a small coffee shop, holding a steaming cup. The human moved strangely, the Shadow noticed. Not with the careful precision of a trained fighter, but with an odd rolling motion that seemed to never fully stop. Humans call it walking, but it looked more like controlled falling. The Shadow had studied human biology before accepting the contract. They were full of water, held up by a skeleton made of calcium, and powered by burning plants and meat in their stomachs. They should have been easy targets. Fragile, weak. So why did Miller smile every time he passed the spot where the Shadow hid? On this 3rd day, the Shadow watched Miller enter the Galactic Embassy. 2 alien species, the crystal-formed Bright Ones and the gas-based Cloud Walkers, were engaged in a heated territorial dispute in the main hall. Their translators screeched with angry words. The Shadow leaned forward. Finally, a chance to see his target under pressure. Miller walked straight into the middle of the argument. He carried no weapons, wore no armor, just a simple gray suit and that same calm smile. The Shadow activated his audio sensors. "Gentlemen," Miller said, his voice oddly steady, "before you continue, would you like to know why you're really angry with each other?" The aliens fell silent. "Cloud Walker ships have been disappearing near Bright One space," Miller continued, "and Bright One crystals are being stolen from their sacred mines. You think you're facing each other's aggression, but I've noticed a pattern in the attack locations." Miller pulled out a simple paper map, not a hologram, just paper and ink. He pointed to seemingly random spots. See these points? They form a spiral. Neither of you would attack in this pattern. But there's a species that builds their nests and spirals. Someone's trying to start a war between you. The aliens stared at the map, then at each other. Centuries of diplomatic training couldn't achieve what this human had done with paper and observation. The shadow felt his throat go dry. Miller had seen a pattern that even his advanced AI systems hadn't noticed. Just by watching. Just by thinking. As the aliens departed as newfound allies, Miller looked directly up at the shadow's hidden position. He raised his coffee cup in a small salute. "You're welcome to come down and talk," Miller called out. "The coffee here is excellent." The shadow didn't move. Couldn't move. For the first time in his career, he felt something alien to his kind. He felt hunted. The shadow knew he should kill Miller immediately. The human was too observant, too dangerous to let live another day. Yet he found himself continuing to watch, trying to understand what made this prey so different. Today, Miller walked through the city park. The shadow followed from tree to tree, his camouflage perfect, his movements silent. No species had ever detected him in stealth mode. But Miller stopped at each tree the shadow had just left, touching the bark with a strange expression. "You're learning," Miller called out to the empty air. "You've switched from rooftops to trees because I kept spotting you up high. Good adaptation, but you're pressing too hard when you land." The bark holds the memory. The shadow froze. Impossible. No being could track by such tiny signs. Later that afternoon, he watched Miller in a meeting with 15 different alien species. A trade deal was falling apart, tempers rising. The shadow noticed something odd about Miller's behavior. The human kept shifting his weight, changing his breathing, adjusting his stance in tiny ways. Then the shadow understood. Miller was mimicking each species' submissive and dominant gestures simultaneously. To the tall, long-necked striders, he showed respect by stretching upward. To the low-growing moss mines, he kept his movements small and close to the ground. Every alien saw what they needed to see in his body language. "Remarkable observation," came a whisper behind the shadow. He spun around, heart racing. Another human stood there, a security guard he'd seen around the embassy. He hadn't heard them approach, hadn't sensed any movement. "Don't worry," the guard said calmly. "I'm not here to stop you, just watching Miller work. Fascinating, isn't it? He's speaking 17 different body languages at once. Most humans can do it unconsciously. We had to learn fast when we were still hunting bigger animals on our world." The shadow remained silent, his camouflage still active. "You're wondering how I saw you," the guard continued. "Simple pattern recognition. You're too perfect. Nature has flaws. Tiny movements. When something has no flaws, our brains notice. We evolved to spot predators hiding in grass, in trees. Perfection stands out to us like a scream." The guard walked away, whistling. The shadow realized his hands were shaking. In the meeting room, Miller had successfully negotiated the trade deal. As the aliens filed out, the shadow watched him gather his papers. Then Miller did something truly frightening. He wrote a note and placed it exactly where the shadow was hiding. "They're right about the perfection. Real things have flaws. Your camouflage is too good, friend. That's why we keep seeing you. Come talk to me before you try anything. I make excellent tea, and I'd rather not have to hurt you." The shadow picked up the note with trembling fingers. All his training, all his perfect kills, and these humans saw him because he didn't make mistakes. What kind of species evolved to fear perfection? The shadow decided to ignore all warnings. He was a professional, the best in the galaxy. These humans were clever, but he had killed clever prey before. He chose a simple method that had worked on 47 different species, a microdrone carrying a lethal toxin. Even if humans could spot perfect camouflage, they couldn't track something smaller than their eye could see. At exactly midnight, the shadow released the drone through Miller's perpetually open window. The human lay sleeping, defenseless. The drone moved silently toward Miller's exposed neck. Three things happened in rapid succession. First, Miller's eyes opened. Not the slow awakening of a disturbed sleeper, but the instant alertness of a predator. Second, Miller smiled. Third, he held up a glass jar, casually trapping the micro-drone inside. Interesting choice, Miller said, sitting up and examining the caught drone. Most assassins try something bigger for their first attempt. But you figured out we track movement and patterns, so you went tiny. Smart. The shadow watched in horror from his position outside. How had Miller known? You're wondering about the timing, Miller continued, seemingly talking to the empty room. Humans are pattern machines. We notice everything, even in our sleep. Your drone disturbed the air currents in my room by 0.1%. That's enough. Our ancestors had to wake up when snakes slithered past in the night. Miller placed the jar on his bedside table. Next to it sat 49 other jars, each containing different microdrones. Your predecessors, Miller explained. I keep them as teaching aids. Would you like to come in and see them? No? Maybe next time. The shadow retreated to his ship, his mind racing. The human had been waiting. Had known not just that an attack was coming, but exactly what kind. Had prepared specifically for microdrones. When he reached his ship, a message waited on the computer. Good try with the drone. Very professional. But here's what you didn't know about humans. We dream in patterns. Even asleep, our brains process thousands of tiny details. We evolved this way because the predators on our world hunted at night. We are never truly defenseless. For your next attempt, please avoid nerve toxins. I'm running out of jar space, and some of those chemicals are quite expensive to dispose of safely. Best regards, James Miller. P.S. I've taken the liberty of examining your previous drone. Brilliant engineering. But you should fix the slight wobble in the left stabilizer. It's off by 0.003 millimeters. The shadow stared at the message for a long time. He had checked that drone personally. Its stabilizer had been perfect. Hadn't it? He was beginning to understand why the other assassins had run. But he still had more methods to try. Didn't he? The shadow spent 3 days researching humans in his ship's database. What he discovered kept him awake at night. Humans were wrong. Everything about them was wrong. Most species evolved from prey animals, developing intelligence to hide and survive. Even the galaxy's apex predators evolved from ambush hunters, striking quickly and resting long. But humans, they came from something else entirely. The shadow watched historical videos with growing unease. Ancient humans chasing large animals under the hot sun, running for hours, never stopping, never resting. Following tracks that were days old, reading stories in broken twigs and disturbed dirt that other species couldn't even see. They called it persistence hunting. The prey would run. Humans would follow. The prey would rest. Humans would appear, hour after hour, day after day, until the prey's mind broke from the stress of being eternally pursued. No wonder they saw through my camouflage, the shadow whispered to himself. Their entire species evolved to track things that didn't want to be found. His computer chimed. A message from Miller. Enjoying your research? Fascinating stuff, isn't it? Did you get to the part about pattern recognition yet? That's my favorite. The shadow quickly checked his ship's security. All systems showed secure. No breaches. No hacks. Yet somehow, Miller knew exactly what he was doing. He forced himself to keep reading. The pattern recognition abilities of humans were almost magical to other species. Where others saw random shapes, humans saw faces. Where others saw chaos, humans found meaning. Their brains were permanently trying to solve puzzles that didn't exist. Until they did. Another message arrived. The pattern recognition explanation helps, doesn't it? Shows you why we keep spotting you. Your camouflage creates a blank space in the natural patterns around you. To a human brain, that's like setting off fireworks. The shadow started checking the database's entries about human physical capabilities. Their endurance was impossible. Their ability to recover from injuries defied biology. They could survive massive blood loss, regrow damaged organs, and their bones actually got stronger when broken. A third message appeared. By the way, you've been reading for 72 hours straight. You should rest. We'd noticed that your species needs sleep every 60 hours. You're probably missing small details by now. The shadow slammed his fist on the console. How? How do they know these things? Final piece of the puzzle. Human social structures. Unlike most species, they formed connections with anything. They kept predators as pets, made friends with prey animals, extended their pattern recognition to understand and empathize with completely alien minds. One last message flashed on his screen. Now you understand why we warned you. We didn't want to hurt you. We don't want to hurt anyone, but we can't turn off what we are. We will see you. We will track you. We will understand you better than you understand yourself. Your next move is in 6 hours. I'll be waiting. P.S. You should really fix your ship's ventilation system. I can hear it rattling from my apartment. The shadow looked at his ship's perfect, silent ventilation system. And for the first time in his life, he felt truly afraid. Everything went wrong at exactly 3:47 p.m. Earth time. The shadow had prepared his most foolproof method. A long-range plasma rifle shot from 2 kilometers away. No patterns to recognize. No tiny drones to catch. Just pure physics and energy. He pulled the trigger. Miller wasn't there. The plasma bolt hit empty air. "Nice shot," said a voice behind him. "But you were breathing too rhythmically while aiming. We could track your position from the heat dispersal pattern." The shadow spun around. Miller stood there, completely calm, drinking his ever-present coffee. More humans emerged from hidden positions all around the rooftop. For the first time in his career, the shadow ran. He activated his camouflage, jumped off the building, and used his gravity manipulators to slow his fall. He sprinted through crowded streets, moving in random patterns, breaking every rule of predictable movement. "You're using Fibonacci spirals in your escape route." Miller's voice came through his comm system. "Common instinct among your species. Turn left in 3 seconds to avoid the street cleaning drone." The shadow turned right instead and hit the drone. As he stumbled, he heard human footsteps, not just behind him, but ahead. They had predicted where he would run, where he would turn. Every move he made, they were already there. "Your species naturally moves in mathematical patterns," Miller's voice explained calmly. "You can't help it. We studied those patterns for months before you arrived." The shadow ducked into a building. Empty. Under construction. Perfect for losing pursuers. "Third floor has loose boards," Miller warned. "Might want to avoid those." The shadow ran up anyway. The boards broke exactly where Miller said they would. As he dangled from a beam, he saw humans entering the building. Not running, not hurrying, just walking. Steadily, relentlessly, their footsteps echoing in a calm rhythm that made his scales crawl. "We can do this all day," Miller said, now standing at the building's entrance below. "In fact, we can do this for weeks. Humans are persistence predators, remember. We don't need to outrun you. We just need to keep you moving until you can't move anymore." The shadow pulled himself up and kept running. Building to building, street to street. He changed patterns, moved in straight lines, tried everything. But everywhere he went, humans were walking. Always walking. Never rushing. Never seeming tired. Just following with that same steady pace that said they could do this forever. His muscles began to burn. His breath came shorter. His species wasn't designed for extended pursuit. "Your heart rate is elevating," Miller's voice noted professionally. "You should probably take a break." "We'll wait." The shadow looked behind him. Humans. He looked ahead. More humans. He looked up. Humans on the rooftops. He looked down. Humans emerging from subway stations. All walking. All patient. All willing to pursue him until he had nothing left. He finally understood why they'd tried to warn him. You couldn't escape humans. They would never stop. Never. The shadow collapsed in an alley, his legs finally giving out. His species could run fast, but not for long. 15 hours of constant movement had broken him. He couldn't even maintain his camouflage anymore. Miller walked into the alley alone, still carrying that same coffee cup. He sat down on a crate nearby, keeping a respectful distance. "Would you like some water?" Miller asked. "Your species needs higher mineral content than humans. I brought the right mix." The shadow stared at him, breathing heavily. "Why? Why are you offering me water? I tried to kill you. 4 times. 5 times, actually. You tried poison gas while I was sleeping last night, but our sense of smell evolved to detect even the slightest chemical changes in the air." Miller placed a bottle of specialized mineral water within reach. "And I'm offering because you're thirsty." "I don't understand you humans," the shadow admitted, cautiously taking the water. "You hunted me relentlessly, but you keep trying to help me. Even your warnings before I started. They weren't threats. They were genuine concern." Miller nodded. "We're predators, yes, but we're also explorers, diplomats, and healers. We evolved to understand the creatures we hunted, to think like them, feel like them. It made us better hunters, but it also gave us empathy. Empathy for an assassin. Empathy for everyone." Miller smiled. "We knew you wouldn't believe our warnings. Your species has to learn through experience. So we let you try. We protected you from your own lethal devices. We guided you away from dangerous mistakes. And when you finally ran, we followed until you were ready to understand." The shadow drank the perfectly mixed water. "Ready to understand what?" "That humans are neither your prey nor your predators. We're something else entirely. We can hunt anything, track anything, kill anything. But we choose not to. We'd rather talk. And if I had succeeded in killing you—" Miller's smile turned sad. "Then other humans would have tracked you. Not for revenge, but because you would be a danger to others. They would never stop, never rest, never give up. Not out of hatred, but out of duty to protect others." The shadow felt a chill despite the warm air. "How many assassins have tried to kill humans?" "Hundreds. None succeeded. Most we caught and talked to, like this. Some we had to stop permanently. A few were smart enough to run when warned. We hoped you'd be one of the smart ones." "It's not too late for that, is it?" the shadow asked quietly. Miller stood up, extending his hand. "That's why we chased you into this specific alley. Your ship is docked in a hidden bay behind that wall. Fully repaired. We fixed that rattling ventilation while you were running. Enough fuel to leave Earth's solar system." The shadow stared at the offered hand. "Why help me escape?" "Because that's what humans do. We can be your most relentless hunters or your strongest allies. The choice is yours. We simply want you to make that choice with full understanding of what humanity really is." The shadow took Miller's hand and stood up. He finally understood the warnings. And he finally understood humanity. 3 months later, the shadow stood before the Galactic Assassins Guild Council, breaking centuries of tradition by speaking publicly about a failed contract. "I stand here to issue a formal warning," he announced to the assembled killers. "Remove all human targets from the contracts list. Mark Earth as a restricted zone. What I learned there must be shared." The council leader hissed in disapproval. "You failed a contract and lived. That itself breaks our laws." "The humans let me live," the shadow replied. "And that's what you need to understand. They could have killed me 100 times. Instead, they protected me from my own weapons, fixed my ship, gave me water when I was exhausted." He activated a hologram showing his chase through the city. The council watched in silence as humans appeared at every turn, always walking, never rushing. "Look at their movements." The shadow pointed. "No wasted energy, no anger. They tracked me through perfect camouflage, predicted my decisions before I made them, caught invisible drones with their bare hands, Perhaps you exaggerate, another council member suggested. The shadow played Miller's final message to the guild. To any assassins considering human contracts, we aren't stronger than you. We aren't faster. We aren't more technologically advanced. We simply see things differently. Patterns, movements, intentions. We can't turn it off. We can't ignore it. And we never, ever stop. But we don't want to hurt you. We don't want to hunt you. Come talk to us instead. We make excellent coffee. The council chamber filled with murmurs. The shadow continued. I've spent my life learning to kill. Humans, they've spent their existence learning to understand. They see through our camouflage because it's too perfect. They spot our poisons because their bodies remember ancient dangers. They track us because their ancestors chased prey until its mind broke. And yet you say they show mercy, the council leader asked. That's the most terrifying part, the shadow replied. They hunt better than any species in the galaxy, but they choose not to. They could dominate everything, but they prefer diplomacy. They could kill us all, but they'd rather drink coffee with us. The council voted unanimously to blacklist all human targets. The shadow's warning spread across the galaxy. Never accept contracts on humans. They'll see you coming. They'll never stop chasing you. But worst of all, they'll probably end up becoming your friends. Back on Earth, Miller sat in his favorite coffee shop, reading the guild's decision on his tablet. A new message appeared from the shadow. The council agreed. No more contracts on humans, though I suspect you already knew they would. Miller smiled and typed back, we recognize the pattern. Your species always makes the right choice when given enough understanding. Would you like to visit next month? I found a coffee blend match to your biology. The shadow's reply came quickly. I'd like that, but no more running this time. No promises, Miller wrote. Humans love a good chase, but this time we'll just run for fun. Somewhere in the galaxy, the shadow laughed. Humans were still the strangest species he'd ever met, and he was very glad they were now his friends instead of his prey.